Welcome to episode 28 of Reconstructing Cave Story. In this episode, we're going to make some damage text. We're just going to do a first pass. There's going to be more complexity later, but this is our first pass, and that's all we're going to do. But for the last episode, before I do this, I had a challenge to name our variable, or our 10 constant, and Sean Klein came up with radix, and he also came up with reversed glyphs instead of reversed sprites, which I like a lot. So thanks, Sean. You genius. No sarcasm. So I'm going to go into our timer.h and rename these because... just kidding, not timer.h. Oh, man. Numbersprite.h. That was a good one, though, right? So here, instead of reverse sprites, I'm going to call it reversed glyphs. And open up number.cc and rename it there to, or numbersprite.cc. Okay, that's it for that. And rename our 10 to radix. So I'll make a const int unsigned int size t. I'll just call it int radix, and that's going to be equal to 10. I guess I'll make it a k radix. And that's that. Compile just to make sure I didn't break anything stupid. Now the episode beginneth. So let's look at what the problem is. The problem is when we're actually playing, we are looking at quote and not at his health bar. So how much damage did he just take? We don't know right now because it only shows in the upper left, and that's too much for us to look up there. So instead of just having a health bar in the upper left, we're also going to have some damage text that appears where quote is and kind of floats up above his head, so it doesn't just sit on top of him. So it floats about one tile up in about a half second, so we are going to use that as our velocity, and it stays around for about 2 seconds and then disappears. So those are the two qualities of our damage text. So let's go ahead and implement it. I'm going to implement it as a class. So let's open up add new item damage text. That's what we're going to call it, damage text.h. So the first thing it's going to need is a draw method, so I'll deal with that first. So I think I'm going to start in the player class and kind of program kind of just build up from that. And down here, near the health, it can't be drawn with the health because it doesn't blink with the health. So it has to be drawn outside of the blinking draw part of this, but I want it to be a part of the player because it is like really a part of the player. Like there's only one and the player has it. Damage text. And let's include damage text, but not spelled like that. Okay, so it's happy now. And we'll just draw it, and then just get a number drawing on the screen, and then work from there. So let's go to our draw method, and outside of the if sprite is visible because Damage text handles its own visibility and it doesn't flash ever, so draw passing with graphics. So I'm going to build and run. Our draw method doesn't do anything yet, so let's make our draw method do something. So I'm going to open up a CC to go with our damage text. New item, damage text.cc. And let's implement our draw method. And it's just going to draw, let's have it just draw number 0 or number 5, how about that, as damage text. So damage text. So we'll just say graphics, nope, we'll say number sprite. So let's include number sprite. Colon, damage number, graphics, and 5, whatever, it doesn't matter. So we also need to know where to draw it because we want it to draw centered on the player. So let's take into our damage text draw method an X and a Y for center X and center Y. So units, game, X, and units of game, Y. And we'll need to include units. And now we need to draw this damage number. So we'll just do dot draw, giving it graphics, X, and Y. And actually, let's make this center X and center Y to be more specific. So let's build and run. No, down here, this should be center X2. Sorry. And let's call it with our center X and our center Y. So do we have a center X and center Y? I don't think we have a center Y, but we have a center X. So let's make center Y too. And that's just going to be Y plus 1/2 tile. So in player.cc, we can call center X, X, and center Y. And build and run. Finally, I think it'll work. Okay, yeah, so now quote has this -5 down here, but it's not quite centered, and that's because the text is being drawn from the upper left. So next, let's make a draw centered method for our number class. So let's go to number sprite.h, and I know I made this width and height thing. I'm going to make these private though, because we don't need them outside of it, and it's easier to just call it draw centered than anything else. So let's call draw and call it centered, and it'll just draw it centered around X and Y, and all it's going to do is call draw with graphics and X minus our width divided by 2 and Y minus our height divided by 2. So now in damage text, we can just call draw centered instead of dot draw. Build. Run. Okay, sweet. Our -5 is centered over quote. So now let's make it float up. So I'll go to do this. We're going to need an update method for our damage text. So I'll do a void, giving it units of milliseconds, elapsed time. And then also I'm going to have an offset Y. Oh, we're going to need to store the center. No, we won't, because we get the center every time we draw. So we just need to have an offset for how high we are. So our offset is going to be in units of gain, and it'll just be called offset Y. So now let's construct our damage text so we can have a default value for this offset Y. and just default it to 0. And when we update it in damage text.cc, let's copy our update declaration. So all we're going to do is, well, first of all, we need a velocity. So let's create that velocity for how fast the text should move up. And this is going to be in units of velocity. And it'll be const. And we'll call it k speed, k velocity. And it's going to be equal to, what did I say? It goes up 1 tile in about half a second. So since our velocity is in units of game per millisecond, it's going to go up 1/2 tile in 500 milliseconds. So that's our velocity. So we just need to add our offset y, add to our offset y. Also, this k velocity is going to be negative because it's going up. So we need to add to our offset y, our k velocity times elapsed time. But we don't want it to go up more than 1/2 tile. So let's do the standard min of units k half tile or negative k half tile, and this offset y plus k velocity times elapsed time. Yeah, so now when we draw it, let's just add in our offset y to our draw centered call and see how this looks. Oh, but we need to update it too. So in our player class, let's call damage text.update. And then build and run, see how it looks. Okay, we can see it's floating up at about the right speed, but it's going too high, and that's because I accidentally did standard min probably. So let's look in damage text.cc. Yep, I did min. No big deal, as long as you test it before it gets released, it's fine. So this goes up -5, and that is not far enough because I meant to do tile, 1 whole tile, because it goes up about 1 tile. Finally, I think this should be right. Oh. Game to tile, this should be tile to game. Nice. Okay. Finally, it should be right. And there we go. It floated up. I couldn't bring it over in time, but you can see that it stopped about a tile above quote, which is perfect. Now let's actually make it disappear when it's done and have some damage associated with it. So I'm going to give it a private variable for damage. Units of HP damage. And this is going to change over time. So it's just going to, for now, I'm just going to have a void set damage that takes in a damage. I'll define it in the CC file. And then we also want to have a timer too. So I'll do a timer called timer. Good enough. So damage, let's define this set damage. And also default our damage to 0. And also create a timer. So I'm going to do all this in the CC file. It's getting to be too much. Here. And our const units of milliseconds, damage, K damage, time equals 2 seconds, so 2000 milliseconds. So we'll give it that K damage time. And get rid of this monstrosity here, and then also define set damage. Extra semicolon, oh no. So first of all, damage is going to be just equal to damage, and then we're also going to reset our damage timer. So damage timer, nope, timer dot reset. And then here in update, nope, here in draw, I'm going to say timer if timer dot expired, return. I think that's all we need. Except in player.cc, we want to be drawing our damage inside of our draw method. So let's change this 5 to damage. And inside of our player.cc, let's call set damage when we take damage. So, oh, that's another thing I'm going to do in this episode. I'll get to that in a minute. So damage text dot set damage to be 2. How does that sound? Let's ask the compiler. Sounds good to the compiler. How does it sound to you guys? Okay, let's go check it out. Boom. Boom. Okay, so the text is disappearing, but it isn't. Oh. Maybe I did mean the standard min. So let's look at this again. So it looks like our offset Y is being updated while we're not watching. So one thing we want to do is, as soon as we set damage, we also want to, for now, we're going to change this later, set our offset Y to be 0 again. And how about if our timer is expired, let's just not even update. So if timer dot expired, return. Sound good? Let's build and run, and this should look better. See it? It goes up. There we go. Goes up again. Now it might be a little bit too slow, but I'm not concerned about that right now. You can play around with constants however you want to, so it's easy. The system's in place. So that almost brings me to a close to this episode, but one more thing I want to do is I want our bat to know how much damage he should be causing. So let's open firstcavebat.h, and I'm just going to make a public method called contact damage, and it'll just return units of HP. What did you do that for? And open up firstcavebat.cc to implement it. And this will be const. And we'll put it below damage rectangle, below update. And we'll just return K contact damage const units of HP K contact damage equals 1, because that's how much damage he actually does. And then in our player class, we also need to add into this when we take damage units HP damage. And same for player.c, take damage needs What are you doing? What the heck? Okay, it needs to take in units of HP damage. And that's happy. Also, I'm going to get rid of this printf statement. We don't need it anymore. And then finally in our game class, we need to pass in the amount of damage. So take damage bat contact underscore contact damage. So let's build and run. Make sure he takes 1 point of damage each time he comes in contact with the bat. Sweet. Sweet. All right, that brings us to a close. Thanks for watching, guys, and happy developing. Oh, actually, okay, so I changed my mind a little bit. I have a couple more things. First of all, this floats 1 tile up in a half a second. Yeah, that's correct, but our player.cc, no, our damage text.cc is doing half a tile per half a second. So I'm going to change this to 250 just to make it twice as fast. And the other thing I noticed in player.cc, we're drawing in our draw method, and I actually want to make this a part of the HUD because I want to put it in front of everything. So I just moved this damage text.draw into our draw HUD, and I will build and run and say goodbye to you again. Just so we can see this beautiful, so beautiful. And it goes much faster, which I love. Okay, now for real, happy developing. Peace out, everyone. Goodbye.